Grandpa, they're taking it all tonight. Liam's whisper sliced through the noise of his birthday party like a draft through an old window. His fingers clutched the hem of my sweater, eyes darting toward the living room where his parents laughed a little too loudly. I blinked. What do you mean, son? He stepped back, shook his head like he'd said too much. Then he picked up a balloon and disappeared into the crowd of cousins and neighbors and store-bought decorations taped half-heartedly to the fireplace mantel. I stood there with a paper plate of cold cake in my hand, unsure whether to sit or run. The lake house smelled like warmed-up pizza and citrus-scented cleaner. My house, but today it felt staged, like I was visiting a life I used to own. Across the room, Brent clapped someone's shoulder, nodding. Shelley poured herself another wine, eyes scanning me like a nurse, checking on a patient too slow to notice his pills missing. They moved like they rehearsed this party. I pressed my fingers against the edge of the plate, flexing my knuckles until the foam creaked. Dad, Brent called from the kitchen, too bright, too loud. Did you try the Pinot Shelley picked it? It's earthy like you like. I didn't answer right away. Because just last week, Brent forgot my name on the bakery order for this same party. Because 2 nights ago, Shelley walked into my den uninvited and said, Walter, have you thought about who'll manage the property once you're not up to it? I hadn't answered then either. And now my 9-year-old grandson was whispering warnings on his own birthday. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like regret, too dry, too late. Outside, the lake was still frozen, but the light through the bay windows had begun to shift softer grayer. I remembered Ellen standing right there 10 years ago in her Sunday apron telling me, don't ever let sentiment make you stupid. She was gone now. Cancer had done what Wall Street wore, and working 52 years hadn't. But I remembered. I set the untouched cake down and walked toward the back hallway. Brent intercepted me mid-step. Heading out already, his voice was pleasant, but his hand on my shoulder lingered too long, just stretching my legs. Maybe later we can all sit down, talk through a few family things. Won't take long. There it was, the reason for the party. Not the balloons, not Liam's cake with the Lego spaceship topper. This was a setup. I looked at Liam sitting quietly by the bay window now, watching the adults with the kind of tired sadness no child should know. Our eyes met. He mouthed, be careful, and I nodded slow and heavy. Back in the kitchen, Shelley waved a stack of napkins in my direction. Walter, I was just saying, it's so wonderful how independent you are. At your age, most folks would have already transitioned to something more manageable. I stared at her. Shelley was always good with words that made you feel like furniture. In that moment, I saw it all. The overly sweet smiles, the doctor visit they insisted I take just in case the lawyer Brent mentioned who happens to be in town next week. And the folder I saw Shelley slip into her tote bag 2 days ago. Heavy, dark green, legal. I stepped back, my knees stiff. Save me a slice of that pizza, would you? I said, voice flat. Shelley blinked, then smiled again. Of course, we'll catch up later. No doubt. Later. The word felt like a trapdoor. I walked to the guest bathroom and locked the door behind me. My hands shook as I ran cold water over them. They thought I was too old to notice, too sentimental, too worn down by memories to act. But I wasn't. I looked into the mirror, water still dripping from my fingers. My face hadn't changed much, not where it mattered. The eyes, staring back, knew a ledger's balance. They knew when something was off. I grabbed a towel, dried my hands slow. Tonight they'd try to make it all official, but not if I got there first. The house was quiet by the time I made it back to my den. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment. The sound of the latch clicking felt louder than it should have. The carpet under my feet still held the faint scent of Ellen's lavender oil she used to drop it into the vacuum bag before cleaning. She hadn't touched that carpet in over 8 years. I shuffled toward the desk by the window, my legs remembering every step. On top of it sat the same brass lamp she insisted we buy at that estate sale in Bismarck. Its shade was fraying, but it still worked, just like me. I switched it on. The light was soft amber. The picture of her in the silver frame was a little dusty. Ellen, in her navy dress, hand on my chest at our 15th anniversary. I picked it up, brushing a thumb along the glass. You wouldn't believe what your son's trying to pull, I murmured. She didn't smile. But then again, she never smiled in that photo, just looked proud, a little tired, like she knew things before they happened. I lowered myself into the chair. Memory's a funny thing. Sometimes it hits you slow, like snow settling on a fence post. Other times it barrels in like spring melt, fast flooding, impossible to stop. I saw myself again at 24 in the cramped break room of Fargo Savings and Trust, wearing a polyester tie too tight at the collar, counting rolled dimes until my fingers smelled like metal. Ellen was new, then just hired to the loan department. She walked past the door every day at 1014, coffee and hand perfume like clean paper and faint citrus. One day I stood and waited. "I'm Walter," I said, blocking the door with nervous courage. "You ever get tired of talking numbers?" She blinked once, smiled. "Only when the people behind them lie." Married 2 years later. Bought this lake house with a down payment from her parents and a fixer-upper loan I co-signed with more optimism than sense. Ellen taught music at the school. I took weekend shifts until my supervisor noticed, promoted, transferred. Then in 1983 I wrote the first internal proposal for what became High Prairie Bank. By 1985 I was signing founding papers. By 1990, Brent was 5 and already asking questions about money. He was clever even then, and he knew how to get what he wanted. I started a college fund the day he turned 6, paid it out before he turned 18, and again at 24 when his first business went under, again at 29 when the second flopped. Ellen worried. "You're raising a man who only knows rescue," she warned once, folding laundry while I stared at another withdrawal slip. "I'm raising a son," I replied. "Isn't that what fathers do?" She nodded, but her eyes never left the socks in her hands. When cancer came, she fought hard. 6 rounds of chemo. A surgery that changed the shape of her voice, but not her resolve. One night, 3 weeks before she passed, I woke to find her in this very chair, pen in hand, writing. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and didn't stop. I found the letter after the funeral, folded carefully in the back of her jewelry box beneath her mother's cameo pin. I haven't read it since, but tonight, I opened the drawer slowly. It was still there, yellowed at the creases but whole. I unfolded it with trembling fingers and laid it on the desk. "Walter," it began, "if you're reading this, then you're probably trying to make sense of something Brent's done." I exhaled. The words blurred. I didn't wipe the tears, no point. "You always see the best in him. That's your strength. And your blind spot." A pause. "You gave him a home, a future, your reputation. If he chooses selfishness, don't give him your freedom too." I sat back, the paper loose in my hands. Outside, the wind had picked up. I could hear it sliding across the frozen lake like a long sigh. I folded the letter slowly, put it in my breast pocket. Not tonight. Not without a fight. Shelley was humming when I walked into the living room, not a tune I recognized, something modern, maybe from one of those feel-good commercials about home insurance or cereal. She was kneeling by the fireplace, surrounded by picture frames and crumpled tissue paper. "What's all this?" I asked, careful to keep my voice light. "Oh," she looked up, cheeks flushed. "Walter, you're up early. I thought I'd refresh the wall, give it a cleaner look for the spring." I stared past her at the wooden paneling. Half the photos were gone. She held up one frame. "This one's cute. Liam is a baby in that little cornfield onesie." "Where's Ellen's?" Shelley blinked, then glanced at the pile by the trash bin. "Oh, that old wedding photo." The glass cracked when I pulled it down. It didn't seem display-worthy anymore. Display-worthy. I moved closer. There it was. Our wedding photo, 1969 chapel in Duluth, Ellen's veil blown just slightly to the left, her eyes locked on mine like we were already planning the next 50 years. The frame was gone. The photo folded and creased. "Did you throw the frame away?" "I mean, it was chipped. Didn't look nice on the mantel anymore." I picked it up from the pile gently. A crease ran across Ellen's mouth like a scar. "You could have asked." I thought I was helping. She turned away before I could respond, shifting her attention to Liam's school art, lining it up like a curator. From the kitchen, Brent's voice floated in. "Dad, do you know where the banking file went? The one with your statements. I was going to help consolidate some stuff." I didn't answer. He stepped into the room a moment later, coffee mug in one hand, casual as a man in someone else's house. "Everything okay?" he asked, noting the photo in my hands. I held it up without speaking. "Ah," he said. "Yeah, Shelley's just giving things a refresh. Sometimes holding on too tight to the past keeps us from managing the future. Your mother is not the past." Brent's I had. "Dad, I didn't mean—" "You know what, never mind." I straightened the photo carefully, trying to smooth the crease. My fingers trembled more than usual. He set the mug down. I was only saying, you've been looking tired lately, forgetful sometimes. I looked at him then, really looked, and saw at the tilt of his head the way his fingers tapped against the mug. Rehearsed. He was trying to lead me somewhere. Have I... He smiled soft and patronizing. It's nothing to worry about. Just, you've got a lot on your plate. That's why we want to help. Take some of that off your shoulders. My shoulders were just fine. It wasn't my shoulders that hurt. It was hearing my son speak to me like a client on his first day of retirement planning. Where's the banking file? He asked again. I moved it. To where? Someplace you don't need to worry about. The smile faltered. Dad. You said you were helping. I didn't ask for that. He picked up his mug again. Right, just thought you'd appreciate some help, that's all. There's no need to get defensive. There was. I just didn't show it yet. He left the room, footsteps a little heavier than before. I turned back toward the fireplace. Shelley was replacing Ellen's photo space with one from our family barbecue last year, Liam holding a sparkler, Brent grinning with a beer me in the background, barely in frame. They're happier photos, she said, as if reading my thoughts. I didn't answer, because the silence was clearer than anything I could say. Later that morning, I sat at the kitchen table alone. Liam wandered in, holding a cereal bowl. You okay, Grandpa? Why wouldn't I be? He shrugged, climbing onto the stool across from me. You look like when I dropped my model rocket in the lake. That kind of face. I smiled, though it took effort. He poked at his cereal. They think you don't remember stuff. I remember. Good. He looked at me then, serious in a way kids shouldn't have to be. Because you're not old in here. He tapped his temple with his spoon. Just in your knees. I chuckled. That's exactly right. He posed. You miss Grandma? Every day. He nodded. Me too. She made the kitchen smell like toast, even when we weren't eating toast. That got me. I rubbed my thumb against the table edge to keep from tearing up. When he left the room, I sat back staring at the spot where Ellen's photo used to hang. I'd built a home. Paid for the roof, the fridge, the school tuitions. I showed up. I forgave. I paid again. Was I raising a man? Or just financing one? The house was too quiet. Even the clock above the stove seemed to tick louder each second like a nail. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the bank website glowing faint blue across my reading glasses. Password. Two-step verification. Security question. Where did you meet Ellen asterisk? Highland Choir Room, I typed. Access granted. The screen loaded column after column of numbers. Clean rows. Familiar entries. Utility bills. Groceries from the local market. Monthly insurance. And then something odd. A $284 charge to a boutique in Minneapolis. The kind of place that sold imported candles and throw pillows with French words embroidered on them 2 days ago. Another $760 to an online wellness subscription yearly renewal. Email confirmation sent to s.dunn@proactivecaremail.com asterisk. I didn't sign up for that. I scrolled further. A $1.400 family consultation retainer for something labeled Elder Vision Services LLC. I paused. Click to expand. The description includes early transition planning, guardianship paperwork templates, virtual notary setup, asterisk. The cursor blinked. So did I. Footsteps passed by in the hallway. Light ones, Shelley's Perfistivision. I didn't close the screen. Let her see. She walked in with a folder under one arm, a smile already loaded. Walter, she said, her voice, doing that thing where it rose slightly at the end like I was a child just out of bed. I was just coming to see you. I nodded at the screen. What's Elder Vision? Oh, she glanced at the laptop but didn't break stride, placing the folder on the table. It's just a service Brent and I were looking into. Future care options. You know, in case you ever want to simplify things. Did I ask for that? Well, not exactly, she said, sitting across from me. But we figured it's better to be proactive. Planning ahead can make things smoother. She opened the folder. Papers, stapled, highlighted. I had some forms printed just to look over. They'd help us manage things so you don't have to worry. Banking mail, taxes, even some medical bits, nothing major. I stared at the top page. Durable power of attorney. My name printed near the top. Brent's name circled in pink highlighter. Shelley watched me. I just want what's best for you, Walter. That's all. We both do. The printer behind her whirred to life. She turned. Oh, must be the second copy. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up the still warm paper she'd placed in front of me. The ink hadn't dried completely. It smudged under my thumb. Shelley's heels clicked down the hallway. I waited until the sound of the laundry room door closed behind her, then exhaled through my nose, slow and steady. They thought I was too slow to follow the trail. I clicked print all. The printer hummed, whirred, then spit out page after page of transactions. Black ink on crisp paper still faintly warm as I stacked them in a manila folder from the bottom drawer. 36 pages total. 12 months of someone thinking I wasn't watching. Each line told a story. A recurring consulting fee every first Friday. Gas station charges in towns I hadn't visited in years. A new iPhone shipped to an address I didn't recognize. I highlighted what I knew wasn't mine. Orange for uncertain, red for confirmed abuse. By page 11, the pattern was clear. Brent and Shelley weren't borrowing. They were testing. Small charges first, then bold ones, then recurring services, all hidden under a blanket of faux concern. I flipped back to the Elder Vision, charge, and opened a new tab. Their site was slick. Friendly fonts, sunset photos, grinning gray-haired couples. The tagline, helping you help them transition. Asterisk. I scrolled to the Family Resources page. At the bottom, a downloadable guide. Asterisk, asterisk, fast-track guardianship. Emergency options for caregivers. Asterisk, asterisk. Uploaded 3 days ago. My chest tightened. I clicked it. A PDF opened 24 pages of forms, scripts, instructions. In one section, a checklist. Collect examples of confusion, missed bills, wrong dates, document fatigue, lost items, memory gaps. Ensure conversations are private, avoid alerting the subject. Subject. That's what I was to them. Not father, not Walter. Subject. My thumb pressed hard into the edge of the mouse. I stood up, walked to the cabinet by the coffee maker, and pulled down a worn leather binder. Inside, my original estate plan notarized with Ellen's initials still scribbled in the margins. I tucked the new folder in behind it, evidence, red tabs and all. Let them play their game. But now I had a rule book too. From the den window I could see Liam tossing a pine cone into the lake's slush edge, his coat too big inherited from me. I watched him for a long moment. They weren't helping. They were positioning. The mug in my hand was warm, but I barely felt it. I stood by the window in the den watching the driveway. Brent's truck had been parked sideways since yesterday, blocking my sedan in like it was some rusted sculpture meant to stay put. I hadn't driven in 3 days. Just rest, Dad Brent had said when I mentioned errands. I can run anything you need. But I hadn't asked. And the list on my fridge, groceries, medicine, gas was still mine. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted bitter thin. Shelley had switched brands last week. Too much caffeine's bad for your blood pressure, she said. The old tin of Columbia dark roast had vanished from the cabinet. In its place, herbal tea. Down the hall, I heard a door creak, followed by Brent's voice measured light. Just a quick conversation, Dad. It won't take long. I turned as they entered. A man followed behind him, early 50s, sweater vest, clipboard under one arm. Neutral smile like a car dealer about to pitch me something polite. Dr. Havel, Brent said. He's just stopping by. We go way back. Pleasure, Mr. Dunn, the doctor said, extending a hand. I'm in town for a conference. Thought I'd say hello. About my health, I asked, not shaking. No, he chuckled. Just general wellness. Brent mentioned you've had some trouble sleeping. That true. I looked at my son. He looked at the carpet. The doctor continued, If it's all right, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Nothing formal, just conversation. I nodded slowly, Saturday in the armchair by the fireplace. He joined me, legs crossed, pen ready. What day is it today, Mr. Dunn? Thursday. Month. March. Year. You think I don't know who's president, too? He smiled. Just routine. Bear with me. The questions kept coming. Address. Last holiday. Who won the last Super Bowl? I answered every one. But the heat rising in my chest had nothing to do with the fireplace. When he left 15 minutes later, Brent followed him out with tight shoulders. I heard them mutter by the porch. The word concerned floated back to me through the glass. I stayed still. The house was quiet again. Until the kitchen screen door creaked open. I walked closer, careful not to be seen. Shelley stood outside, phone to her ear, pacing the deck in her slippers. I know, she whispered, but he's fragile. We just need a few more signs. Yes. Then it's a formality. The next morning, the drawer in the hallway felt different. I opened it slowly. Gone were the stamps, the envelopes with my return address, the list Ellen kept for household contacts, plumbers, doctor, lawn service. In their place, a plastic organizer with labels, finance, medical utilities, all color-coded, all empty. I closed it. Walked to the fridge. My doctor's appointment next Thursday, circled in red marker, had been erased. In its place was a magnet that read asterisk. Less stress, more smiles. Asterisk. I didn't smile. Later, I caught Brent unplugging the modem. Internet acting up, he muttered. Thought I'd reset it. But I watched him take the router into the guest room and shut the door behind him. Shelley rearranged the pantry. Brent borrowed my car for just a few errands and returned it with the gas below half. The house was still mine, but it no longer felt like mine. Except when Liam was around. That afternoon, he shuffled into the den carrying 2 books, Call of the Wild, and a dog-eared copy of my old construction codes manual. Can we read? Of course. He curled up beside me on the couch, his small shoulder pressed to my side. I opened the first book. But he looked up. Grandpa, yes. Why do people act nice when they're not? I paused. What do you mean? Mom always smiles, but sometimes. Her eyes don't, like she's pretending. Like in school plays. I shut the book. That's a hard question, son. Do adults do that to other adults too? All the time. He nodded. Thought about it. Are you pretending right now? No, I said without thinking. I'm waiting. For what? For the right moment. He leaned into my side. We didn't speak for a while. The wind rattled a loose shutter outside. A truck drove by, tires hissing on cold pavement. Liam broke the silence first. You don't seem fragile to me. I looked down at him. He didn't blink. Neither do you, I said. The grill hissed as fat hit the flames. I stood off to the side, paper plate in hand, watching Brent flip burgers like he was born for it. He laughed louder than usual, retelling the same college stories to the Johnsons from 2 houses down. And that was the night I borrowed Dad's car without asking and ended up in a ditch, he said, gesturing toward me. Right, Dad. I nodded once. Everyone chuckled. Brent always knew how to charm a crowd. Shelley poured wine, moving from guest to guest like a hostess at a charity brunch. Her apron read asterisk live laugh grill, asterisk the kind of joke Ellen would have side-eyed into oblivion. The backyard smelled of propane, overcooked meat, and fresh-cut grass. Spring hadn't warmed everything yet, but the sun tried. I stood by the garden fence, plastic fork slicing through a piece of potato salad I didn't want. Brent raised his glass. Let's toast, Dad, he said, voice full of shine. He's decided to let go of some of the paperwork and let us take over the heavy lifting. Smart move at his age. I froze. The clink of glasses was soft, but definite. My mouth was dry. Someone muttered, That's good of him. Brent looked my way. You're okay with that, right, Dad? All eyes turned. I swallowed. I didn't know I'd made it official. Shelley giggled. Well, we're still sorting through things, but it's good to plan ahead. Better than waiting for problems, right? People nodded. They always nodded when they didn't understand. I excused myself with a polite smile and walked into the house. The air inside was cooler still. I stepped into the hallway past the den and into the guest bathroom, closed the door behind me. A file folder sat open on the counter. Their mistake. Inside copies of documents I hadn't signed, at least not yet. But my name was there. Typed. Labeled. On one page, my signature had been traced in black gel pen. Only, it wasn't my pen. And it wasn't my handwriting. I held it up to the light. The ink shimmered, still slightly wet. I folded the document slowly, crease by crease, just like Ellen used to fold her letters, neat, deliberate, final. My name was on that paper. But not my hand. I slipped it into my inner jacket pocket behind my wallet. The fabric there was warm. It felt like hiding a matchstick before the storm. Outside voices drifted in. Laughter. Someone popped open a soda. The metal hiss echoed faintly through the hallway. I rinsed my hands. dried them with a towel that still smelled faintly of lemon. Then I looked up. The man in the mirror looked calm. Too calm. I walked out slowly, nodding at the guest who held the door. Back in the yard, the smell of charred onions hit me first. Then the sound Brent finishing another joke about my old man quirks. More polite laughter followed. "Dad's back," he called, raising his beer. "You all right?" "Of course," I said. "Just had to check if I was still alive." They laughed harder than the joke deserved. I smiled. Shelley handed me a plate piled high. "We saved you the good stuff." I nodded. "You always do." I sat beneath the pergola, legs crossed, listening. Every sentence now came with weight. Every glance, every overly cheerful toast, every shoulder pat staged. Even Liam seemed subdued. He sat cross-legged near the dog, tossing crumbs into the grass, eyes flicking toward me now and then. Brent passed behind me, whispering, "Thanks for playing along." I looked up, always happy to support a show. He grinned, then wandered off to refill drinks. Later, after the guests had gone and the coals hissed out, I walked the yard alone. The sky had turned lavender. A few birds traced circles overhead, restless in the breeze. I reached the far corner of the fence where Ellen once planted tomatoes. Nothing grew there now. I pulled the paper from my pocket, ran a thumb over the fake signature again. They thought this was done. That the scene was set. That I was too old to notice ink that wasn't mine. Too sentimental to call it theft. But I'd seen it now. And once seen, it couldn't be unseen. Let them smile. I was watching now. The clock read 2:08 a.m. The house was still too still. Outside, wind brushed against the gutters like fingers dragging across tin. I padded down the hallway in my slippers, the floor cold through the soles. The office door creaked when I pushed it open. Same old leather chair, same bookshelf, same faint smell of paper coffee and the vanilla Ellen loved. But tonight I didn't sit. I walked to the far wall and looked up at our wedding photo. Ellen enlaced me in a gray suit, holding hands outside the old courthouse. I reached behind the frame, slid the latch. The portrait lifted free with a soft groan. Behind it, the safe, matte black keypad blinking. I hadn't opened it in years. Not since before Ellen passed. I stared at the buttons, then typed 031947. Her birthday. The lock clicked. Inside, everything was just as I left it. Stacks of file folders, each labeled in my handwriting. A sealed envelope marked asterisk in case of emergency. Asterisk, 3 old bank ledgers, a USB drive in a labeled bag. I took them out slowly. The folder marked asterisk. First Capital Holdings asterisk was thickest. Inside, purchase agreements, transfer records, a notarized statement placing me as the controlling silent partner for Northview Community Bank. The bank Brent didn't know I still owned. The irony. He was planning to control the man who controlled the bank. I set the documents down, hands steady, but my breath wasn't. In the bottom of the safe sat a cream envelope. It had Ellen's writing on it. Just my name, Walt. Asterisk. Asterisk. I slid a finger under the flap and opened it. Inside, 3 paragraphs. Faded ink. Neat, cursive. At the end, underlined once. Asterisk, asterisk, don't let kindness make you blind. Asterisk, asterisk. My throat tightened. She'd known. Long before I ever suspected, she'd seen it in Brent. In how he borrowed, how he deferred, how he smiled with his mouth, but never his eyes. The safe door hung open beside me. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. But I felt wide awake now. The USB drive was small, black, no markings, just a worn corner where the plastic chipped. I slid it into the port on my laptop. A folder popped open. Ellen. Contingency docs. Click. Inside, PDFs. Dozens. Titles like Property Titles, 231 Pineview Lane, PDF. Bank Ownership Structure, 2013, Private, PDF. Trust, Walter E. Dunn, Revocable Terms, PDF. I opened the trust file. Legal text. Clean formatting, but Ellen's initials appeared in the margins. She'd reviewed every word. Midway through the document, I saw a clause highlighted in yellow. Asterisk, asterisk. In the event the grantor is found to be under undue influence or declared mentally impaired, all disbursements and transfers shall be frozen pending third-party legal review. Asterisk, asterisk. My pulse slowed. That clause, it was a wall. An automatic break if anyone tried to fast-track power of attorney or move funds without clear independent confirmation. Ellen had built a legal shield, one I didn't even know I needed. I leaned back, exhaled. In another folder, scanned receipts. Every asset moved into the trust had been documented, time-stamped, notarized. There was even a handwritten list labeled asterisk, asterisk, hidden in plain sight, asterisk, asterisk. It included Northview Bank Class, a shares held via Shell, LLC, cabin deed, Devil's Lake under cousin's name stored here, life insurance with double clause, Walter only, revocable. She had built an empire with quiet steps, not to control me, to protect me. I clicked the last file. It opened to a single line, asterisk, asterisk, if they ever come for you, this is your armor, asterisk, asterisk. My hands shook not from fear, from something older, recognition. Gratitude. Love. I closed the laptop. Reached for the cream envelope again, ran my thumb over her handwriting one more time. The safe was still open beside me. The house silent, but inside me something had shifted, not rage, not grief, just a kind of steel settling into place. You left me a shield, Ellen, I whispered. And now? It was time to use it. The house was dark, but I didn't turn on the lights. Sometimes clarity doesn't need brightness, just silence. I sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, yellow pad in front of me. Steam from the kettle traced lazy spirals into the air. I let the tea sit untouched. Ellen used to drink lemon balm tea on nights she couldn't sleep, said it helped still the mind. I didn't want stillness. I wanted strategy. I started writing. Asterisk, asterisk 1, call Mitch, review trust and update emergency clause, asterisk, asterisk 2, lock all online accounts, reset passwords, asterisk, asterisk 3, alert Bank James, freeze all personal withdrawals, asterisk, asterisk 4, safe deposit box, inventory assets, asterisk, asterisk 5, schedule physical, prove competence. H-line steadied me. I was rebuilding the frame they tried to tear down. I paused. The grandfather clock in the living room ticked, loud, even, like breath. My hands remembered the weight of lumber, the smell of fresh concrete. Years of construction taught me this. Foundations matter more than finishes. Ellen had laid the foundation. It was my turn to build the structure. I sipped the tea, still too hot, bitter. My eyes wandered to the wall above the sink. Ellen's calendar still hung there. March. A tiny pressed daffodil pinned next to Sunday Square, her tradition. Below that, a list in her handwriting, milk bread, call Walter's dentist. Even in her absence, she organized my life. I closed my eyes. I saw her in the garden sleeves, rolled up hair pinned loosely, digging hands first into soil, planting things no one thought would grow in North Dakota clay. And yet they bloomed, just like this. This wasn't revenge, it was renewal. Reclaiming what was nearly lost. I turned to a new page. List of calls, Monday morning, Mitch, 900, James, 930, Dr. Patel, 1015. Catherine Notary, check availability. I underlined the times. Let Brent and Shelley keep smiling. Let them think the signatures were theirs to gather. Let them think the old man was folding quietly. I glanced at the clock. 3, 4, 2 a.m. Let them think I was tired. I'd never been more awake. The printer hummed in the corner of my office. Page after page slid out proof plans, the paper trail they thought I didn't have. I stacked the documents neatly, slipped them into a brown envelope, wrote, on the front, asterisk, asterisk, for legal witness do not tamper, asterisk, asterisk. My handwriting looked steadier than I expected. The house remained still. Even the fridge stopped humming for a while. Just the soft tick of the thermostat and the low exhale of spring wind against the kitchen window. I booted up the old desktop. Ellen slower than mine, but still ran like it remembered her hands. I transferred the USB contents into a backup folder named asterisk, asterisk, shield, wed. Asterisk, asterisk, encrypted it. Then copied it onto a second drive. Redundancy. Ellen always said that word like a prayer. The clock read 4:38. I picked up my phone, found Catherine Davis in my contacts. She was Ellen's notary. Quiet, discreet, sharp as a tack. The kind of woman who saw more than she said. I drafted a message, asterisk, asterisk. Catherine, urgent family paperwork. Need witness tomorrow, 10 a.m. My place. Confidential, asterisk, asterisk. Paused. Then hit send. I moved to the foyer, opened the coat closet, and reached behind the shelf. Pulled free the small black box, the security hub. The camera I'd installed 6 years ago above the front door was still wired in, LED still blinking. I plugged the monitor into the hallway socket. Grainy images came alive. The front porch, the walkway, my mailbox. I flipped through the last 24 hours. Clear images, Brent bringing in boxes, Shelley walking back from the car with a folder under her arm. They didn't know I had this. Good. I unplugged it again. No need to show my cards yet. The kettle hissed again, boiled dry. I turned off the burner, then slipped on my coat and stepped outside. The air hit cold and wet against my cheeks. Dawn still an hour off. I crossed the yard, slippers damp in the grass, and stood at the edge of the old garden. Tomato stakes still stood there, weathered, leaning. I crouched low, brushed my fingers against the soil. It crumbled soft. She used to say it took 3 years to get soil to listen. This garden listened. I closed my eyes. Felt the wind wrap around my neck like Ellen's scarf in November. We're not done, Ellen, I whispered, and I meant it. The sun hadn't cleared the horizon yet. Light came in soft, washed gray through the blinds. I moved slowly around the kitchen, keeping the limp in my right knee more pronounced than usual. Part of the show. The kettle clicked off. I poured 2 cups of coffee, 1 strong, 1 decaf, and set them on the counter just like Ellen used to do when we had guests before church. Catherine was the first to arrive, right on time, 9:45 sharp. She stepped in with her notary kit in one hand, a leather folder in the other, and a firm nod for good morning. Her gray blazer was pressed and her eyes moved quick. Everything's ready, I said, voice low thin. She studied me. You look tired. Didn't sleep, I replied, letting the words settle. Big family decisions coming. She said nothing but opened her kit and began checking her seal. At 9:58, James Miller pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as he stepped out of his sedan, adjusting his tie. The man hadn't aged much. Same calm stride, same habit of glancing at the sky before walking in as if checking the forecast for trouble. By 10:02, both sat in my living room. I stayed standing, letting my hand tremble just slightly as I poured the coffee. Appreciate you both being here, I said then, let a pause linger. Things are moving fast with Brent and Shelley. James sipped his cup. You sure you want us in the room for this? I need witnesses, I said, just in case the paperwork isn't what I was promised. Catherine gave the faintest nod. I walked to the hallway closet, opened a high shelf, and pulled down the small black box, my recorder. Just a button, 1 red light. I clicked it on, slipped it into the breast pocket of my shirt. Then I sat down, slow, 1 hand on my back. They think I'm signing, I whispered. James leaned forward. I met his eyes. I'm recording. The doorbell rang at exactly 10:07. I waited 5 seconds before standing just long enough to let them think I'd needed the extra moment. Brent's voice called out first. Dad, we're here. I opened the door with a tired smile. He stepped in, holding a leather document case. Shelley followed close behind, lips tight in a half smile, arms wrapped around her purse like it held gold. Hope we're not too early, she said, glancing at James and Catherine already seated. Right on time, I said, motioning them in. Coffee still warm. Brent scanned the room. His smile flickered when he saw the notary seal on the coffee table. Nice setup, he said. Very official. It should be, I said, lowering myself into the chair across from them. Shelley sat beside Catherine, carefully opening the folder on her lap. We had our lawyer clean everything up, just formalities. She passed a set of papers to Catherine. These grant us temporary management rights for Dad's medical and financial decisions. Nothing binding yet, just help. Catherine's brow lifted slightly. She didn't say a word, just started reading. Brent leaned toward James. You're with the bank, right? James nodded once. Yes, Walter and I go back some years. Brent grinned. Good to know. We've been thinking a lot about consolidating Dad's accounts. Less hassle for everyone. Shelley reached over and patted my hand. We just want what's best for you, Walter. I let my hand tremble slightly in hers, then pulled it back. James spoke careful and measured. Did Walter request this change? Brent laughed. He's been overwhelmed, haven't you, Dad? Bill's appointments, it's too much. I blinked twice. Hard to remember some things these days. Catherine turned a page. Her eyes narrowed. The room quieted. She looked up at me, just a flick of her gaze. Not pity. Something else. Recognition. I gave the smallest nod. The recording device in my pocket was still warm from my chest. And now, so was the room. Catherine flipped another page, her finger pausing halfway down the line. The power of attorney becomes effective immediately upon signature, she read aloud, her voice calm but precise. Shelley smiled quickly. That's just to help move things along. Dad's been so tired lately. I nodded slowly, eyes on the document. Tired, yes, that's true. Brent leaned forward. Which is why we really think this is best, Dad. Just until things stabilize, then we'll give full control back. Catherine looked at me. Walter, do you understand the scope of this document? I let the pause stretch. Then I asked softly, what protections are there? For someone who might be confused but not incompetent, who's just being pushed. She turned to Brent. Did your attorney explain any legal safeguards for potential coercion? Brent blinked. What number? It's standard language. James adjusted in his chair. Actually, the bank generally recommends delayed activation or medical confirmation for these types of arrangements, especially in family matters. Shelley's fingers tightened on her folder. This isn't about taking control. It's about support. I turned to Catherine. What happens if someone signs under pressure or doesn't fully grasp what's being given away? Brent cut in too quickly. Dad, no one's pressuring you. But the pitch in his voice betrayed him. Catherine closed the folder slowly. In cases where undue influence is suspected, she said it's not legal to notarize, even with consent. Silence bloomed across the room. Shelley shifted. Brent cleared his throat. James didn't move. Catherine looked directly at me. Walter, are you confident that you want to sign this today? I looked at Brent, then at Shelley. Then back at Catherine. Not yet, I said. She pressed the folder shut with both palms. This isn't ready for signature. The room exhaled, and for the first time that morning I felt the weight shift in my direction. Catherine stood slowly, closing her notary journal with a soft snap. I won't witness this, she said. There's too much pressure, too little clarity. Brent's face darkened. This is ridiculous. He asked for our help. Did he? Catherine replied, eyes still on the document. Because everything I've seen this morning says otherwise. Shelley leaned forward. Walter, honey, if this is about the wording, we can revise, but delaying this only hurts you. Her tone had turned syrupy, thicker than before. False. James placed his briefcase on his lap and unlatched it. Before anything proceeds, he said, I'd like to review some recent activity. He pulled out a printed statement. Transfers from Walter's primary account last month. 3 large withdrawals. 1 for home renovations in your name, Brent. Another labeled private tuition, but Walter's not enrolled anywhere. Brent blinked. That's Alexa's tutoring. She needed it. $10,000, James asked mildly. That's some tutoring. Walter said nothing. He just watched, like a man who'd been here before, who'd already seen the script. Shelley's lips parted, but no words came. Catherine stepped back from the table, her eyes still fixed on the pair. This is why these documents require caution, she said, because money can talk louder than love. Brent's voice cracked. We didn't do anything wrong. James laid another paper down. You withdrew $27,000 in a single day, split between 2 cashier's checks made out to a law firm in Fargo. Shelley flinched. The light through the living room window caught the tension in her jaw. I finally stirred, lifted my cup, took a long, slow sip. Let's not pretend we're surprised, I said. And I wasn't. Not for a moment. I reached beneath the side table and pulled out a thin black folder. Catherine and James had seen it before. Brent and Shelley hadn't. I placed it gently on the coffee table and opened it. Inside were copies of every payment I'd made to them in the past 3 years. Dated, notarized, annotated. I slid the first sheet forward. The 14th of August. $2,500 for roof repairs. You said there was storm damage. The invoice never existed. Brent stiffened. Next sheet. The 2nd of October. $4,800 car emergency. I later found the mechanic's receipt. It was for an audio system upgrade. James leaned forward. All from Walter's primary checking. I nodded, then flipped to the next page. The 19th of January. 12,000. Shelley said it was for Alexa's school fundraiser. I looked at her. She goes to public school. Shelley opened her mouth, then closed it. The papers kept coming, one by one like bricks, stacking into a wall. Brent broke first. Why are you bringing this up now? We're family. That's exactly why I said. Because I trusted you. I set down the last page. You didn't break my trust yesterday. Pause. You broke it slowly, transaction by transaction. James folded his hands. Catherine glanced between them and me. Nobody moved. And for once, nobody talked over me. I reached into the second drawer of my desk and pulled out a thick envelope. It was sealed, signed. Handed it to James. My updated will, I said, calm as stone. Signed yesterday. Everything is now placed into an educational trust for Alexa, managed independently. Brent's face turned pale. Shelley shot up from her chair. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, I replied. You wanted control. You almost had it. But you forgot one thing. I'm still alive. Brent stood slowly. Dad, come on. Please. We've made mistakes, sure, but we can fix this. You had 3 years to fix it, I said. You chose instead to spend, manipulate, and smile through it. James reviewed the document briefly. This trust is airtight, he said. Funds will be locked until Alexa turns 21. Distributed for education only. No access for Brent or Shelley unless specified in writing. Catherine looked at them both. You plan to take over his life. He's reclaiming it. Shelley's voice cracked. We're your family. No, I said. Alexa is my family. Brent's voice dropped. What about us? What are we supposed to do? You'll work, I said flatly. Like everyone else. You'll grow up. Like I had to. Like Ellen did. I turned to James. Thank you for the support. He nodded. I turned back to Brent and Shelley. You wanted power, I said, voice steady, unwavering. I gave it to our future. They didn't slam the door when they left, but they didn't say goodbye either. I stood in the hallway listening to their footsteps fade down the front steps, then the sharp click of the car doors. The engine turned over, then silence. No gravel kicked up. They drove off slow. James and Catherine gathered their things without a word. Professionals, both of them, but their eyes held something quiet. Respect. Maybe sorrow. At the door, James touched my shoulder. You did what had to be done. Catherine added, it's rare. For someone your age to stand that tall. I didn't stand, I said. I waited too long. They left. And I was alone again. I returned to the living room and began clearing the table, stacking the untouched coffee cups, folding the document folders shut. My hands moved slower now, not from age, but from weight. I carried the dishes to the sink, rinsed them under water that never quite got hot enough. Then I stepped outside. The breeze was cool, but not harsh. North Dakota spring had a way of creeping in gently through soil first, then sky. The bench at the edge of the yard sat half in shade. Ellen's bench. Her garden lay beside it, mostly empty now, just the first signs of green along the border. I lowered myself down, one hand on the worn armrest. It was quiet. No footsteps behind me. No voices from the house. Just birds and wine through the birch trees beyond the fence. I let my shoulders drop. 3 years of giving. 1 hour of taking it back. And now this. A kind of stillness that didn't feel like peace. Not yet. The house felt larger now. Not because they were gone, but because the truth had taken up all the space they used to fill. I walked slowly to the hallway closet, reached up to the top shelf and pulled down a box I hadn't opened since Ellen's funeral. It smelled like old cedar and linen. Inside was the photo album. Dark green leather, frayed at the corners, Ellen's handwriting in silver ink on the spine. Asterisk, our days. Asterisk, I sat in the armchair by the window. Light slanted across the pages. Brent's baby picture wrapped in a blue knit blanket Ellen had made herself. His first steps blurred photo, but I could still see the wobble in his knees. A summer at the lake. Him on my shoulders, arms stretched like wings. I ran my hand over the plastic film covering the images. Ellen had loved these pages. She'd used captions like poems. Asterisk, tiny feet, giant trust. Asterisk, asterisk. 2 hearts in one photo. Asterisk. I reached a later page. Brent at his college graduation. Ellen was smiling beside him, proud and tired. And I looked like a man who believed the future was safe. I closed the album softly. Let it rest on my knees. I didn't raise a thief, I whispered. Then stared out the window, but I fed one. I stayed that way for a long time. Until a sound broke the silence. 3 soft knocks on the front door. Not urgent. Not demanding. Just small. And steady. I stood up. My knees creaked, but my heart moved faster. Alexa. She stood on the porch, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair a little messy, like she'd run part of the way. I opened the door and stepped aside. Hey, sweetheart. Alexa didn't smile right away. She just looked up at me, eyes searching for something she couldn't quite name. Mom said you might want to see me, she said softly. I always want to see you. She stepped inside. The air between us felt heavier than it should have for a Saturday morning. We walked to the kitchen side by side, but quiet. I pulled out a chair for her, then poured 2 glasses of orange juice. She stared at the condensation sliding down the glass before asking, Are they mad at me? I sat across from her. Number. She nodded slowly, then looked up. Did I mess everything up? You did something very brave, I said. You told the truth. And that's never the wrong thing. But now everything's different. I reached across the table, took her hand gently. Yes, it is. But sometimes different means safer. She blinked fast, and I saw the tears she was trying to hold back. He squeezed her fingers. You'll never face that alone, I promise. She wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve. Mom said you changed everything. I changed what needed changing, I said. For you. For your future. Alexa looked down, then up again. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Does that mean I can still visit? I smiled. Every Saturday. And maybe Sundays too, if you help me with the garden. Her face lit up just a little, and in that light I saw Ellen again. We stepped into the backyard together. The air was crisp, with just enough warmth to promise spring. Birds scattered from the fence as we walked toward Ellen's garden. The soil was still damp from last night's rain. Alexa crouched beside the raised bed, poking gently at the soft earth. What are these? She asked. I knelt down beside her. Daffodil bulbs. Ellen loved them. Said they were stubborn little things, always the first to push through after winter. She dug a shallow hole with her fingers. Do they always come back? If you plant them right, I said, and if you take care of them. She placed the bulb in the hole like it was fragile glass. I handed her the watering can. She tilted it carefully, letting the water soak the spot. I think I'd like to plant something every year, she said. Maybe I'll be a gardener. You'd be a good one. Or maybe a vet. She glanced at me, grinning now. Or both. I laughed. Ambitious. She stood brushing dirt off her jeans. I want to help things grow. I looked at her, really looked. There was strength there, quiet, steady, like Ellen's. And somewhere inside me something let go. The fear, the guilt, the ache of what had almost been stolen. Her future had room for everything. Mine finally had peace.